Hey campaigners, I want to set the scene a bit about the chaos at the 1968 Democratic National Convention by actually starting several months earlier, in March of 1968. In March of 1968, sensing that the Vietnam War had divided the Democratic Party, that he had no chance to beat the emerging left of his party, young folks, African Americans, women, hippies who were voting in major numbers and participating in electoral politics, the sitting president, incumbent Lyndon Baines Johnson, decided in an unprecedented move that he was going to step down at the end of his first term. Shortly thereafter, the slain former president's brother, Robert F. Kennedy, decided he was going to enter the race and enter the race quite seriously, even though he had had reservations even just months before. He enters the race quite seriously and becomes the front runner within just a few short primaries. In June, early June of 1968, as Robert F. Kennedy has just finished giving his victory speech after winning the California primary, he's shot and killed going to his car in the kitchen just after giving that speech. And that shocking turn of events left the Democratic Party really fractured. And they were fractured between establishment candidates who were going to continue Lyndon Johnson's tradition and continue his policies, especially continuing the war in Vietnam, and other candidates such as Eugene McCarthy, who kept going with and kept alive Robert F. Kennedy's coalition of youth vote, of African Americans, and of an anti-poverty crusade to campaign against the war, to campaign against violence. And so the party was sort of split down the middle between pro-Vietnam War, LBJ, and these are candidates like Hubert Humphrey, candidates like George McGovern, and anti-war, primarily candidates like Robert F. Kennedy, but after he was shot, it was just Eugene McCarthy. So throughout the summer, Eugene McCarthy, the anti-establishment, anti-war candidate, continues to win primaries after primaries, caucus after caucus, keeping the race between himself and Hubert Humphrey close, even though he's winning in the popular vote leading up to the convention in Chicago. So McCarthy takes a lead in delegates that he's gotten through votes and primaries and caucuses that he's won into the convention. And since the convention process of selecting a candidate hasn't changed just yet, there's still an amazing amount of votes at stake. And those votes are distributed by power brokers within the party, in both the Republican and Democratic Party at the time. And they engineer a kind of a coup at the convention where the leader, McCarthy, coming into the convention, many of the votes that he could have won through delegates, through power brokers, were given to Hubert Humphrey. And in an incredibly contested convention, Humphrey ends up winning. Humphrey ends up winning the nomination and then ultimately losing to Richard Nixon in a close election that November. But the point is that it completely fractured the convention. It fractured the party, and it led to some pretty amazing images of violence, both outside the convention hall especially, where dozens were wounded, killed, lots of property destruction, thousands of people in the streets, mace, riot dogs, riot gear, SWAT teams, etc., and even violence in the convention, as we'll explain.